Okay, Be'ezus Hashem. Today's daf is Masechta.
Baruch Hashem, Baruch Hashem.
Oh, God, Baruch Hashem. Nice to hear you. Okay, today's daf. Here we go. Sheldon is here. Hi, Sheldon. Okay, today's daf, Be'ezras Hashem, is daf Mem Tes. And we are discussing over here a machlokes in the Gemara that we have between Rav and Rabbi Yochanan. We know that if a person backs out, if someone gave money, he gave money to buy a transaction, and he did not do Mashicha. In other words, let's say he committed to buy a piece of a couch, and he gave the money, but he did not remove the couch from the seller's domain. And so if you back out, technically, according to the law, you could back out. You don't have to follow through. You could ask for your money back. But if you do, then you get a mishapara. We learned that in the previous Gemara, you get a curse called mishapara. God who takes revenge of the Dora Mabel will take revenge against people who commit to a transaction and then back out of the transaction. A Jew, once he gives his word and he pays for the transaction, should not be backing out of the transaction. That's given. But what happens if you only paid for part of the transaction? Let's say, again, with the couch, you put down, if the couch is X amount, $1,000, and you put down only $100. So can you back out and mikabel and get your money back? So Rav said you can back out of the 900 you didn't pay for, but the 100 that you put your money, that you have to keep. In other words, I don't know how they're gonna. If it's a couch, it's hard to break up. But let's say you're buying wheat, and you're committed to buy $1,000 worth of wheat, and you only put down $100. So $100 you have to buy, and the $900 you could say I'm backing out of the transaction. And Rabbi Yochanan said, "Keneged kuleihu kainer." Rabbi Yochanan said that once you put a deposit on the transaction, it's as if you bought the whole thing, and therefore, if you're going to back out of that transaction, you're going to get a curse, okay? Even though you only put down a partial payment. So the Gemara says, let us say that machlekes between Rav and Rabbi Yochanan, if you put a partial payment onto something, is a machlekes tanoim. Why? Is a machlekes tanoim. Here we go. That the hamalbes chaver al mashkin. The Brisa says if someone lends his friend, and let's say he lends his friend $1,000, and he received a mashkin, a collateral of $100. The nichnas shmita, and shmita is almost done, right? The 70 yen, loans are canceled by shmita. However, if there is a collateral, we view as the collateral as the loan as being partially paid up, or therefore it would not cancel the loan. So the Brisa says, afal pishein shavel a plug. Even though the collateral is only worth half the amount of the original loan, Shmita will not cancel out that loan. This is the words of Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi Rabbi Yehuda the Hanasi says, it depends. If the collateral was corresponding, was worth the entire value of the loan, Shmita will not cancel out such a loan, because it's almost as if the loan is paid back if the collateral is equal to the amount of the loan. Vim lav, but if not so, if it's anything less than the value of the loan, Shmita will cancel out such a loan. We learned Rab Shimon Gamliel says that even if the collateral is worth only half, right, then the loan is not canceled. What did Rabbi Shimon Gamliel mean? Did Rabbi Shimon Gamliel mean that half the loan is not canceled, but the other half, that there is no collateral spoken for, so then that half of the loan is canceled. In other words, if the loan is $1,000 and you gave a collateral of $500, the Rabbi Shimon Gamliel is saying that the $500 you gave collateral for, that part of the loan is not canceled by Shemitah, but the other half is. So Michlal, so if that's the way you learn Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi Sava lahach pal ganami mishamid. Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi will hold that the half, that even the partial that you did give the collateral for, will also be canceled out, because as long as the loan is not equalized by a collateral worth that amount of the loan, so then it's not cancelable. Then the loan is canceled by Shemitah. If that's so, that wouldn't make sense. We go to the top of the page. Ella mashkin denokat lamali. Why is the guy holding on to a mashkin? According to Yehuda Nasi, if the person took a collateral, it's for a reason that he doesn't want the loan to be canceled. According to Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, according to Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, as long as the mashkin is not worth exactly the amount of the loan, then the loan is canceled. So what's the point of giving a collateral for? It must be like this. This is the machlokes. My enim shamet. What did Rabbi Shimon Gamliel? The Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. What did Rabbi Shimon Gamliel say? That the loan is not canceled. Enim shamet bekulay. That the loan is it's not canceled at all, even though you gave a partial collateral. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel holds that's as if you gave a whole collateral, and therefore the loan is totally not canceled. Umay meshamet the Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. And what is that the loan is canceled according to Rabbi Yehuda Nasi? It's only in the half that you did not give a mashkin. So in our example, if you gave a $500 mashkin on a loan that's worth $1,000, according to Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, the total loan is not canceled. According to Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, since you gave a partial payment, that partial payment, that part of the loan is not canceled, but the other part is canceled because there is no collateral taking care of that part of the loan. And this is what be the argument. Reb Shimon ben Gamliel Sava, Reb Shimon ben Gamliel holds kineged kulehu kaina. Giving a partial payment is as if you gave the entire payment. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi Sava, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi will hold kinegdehu kaina. The partial payment is only for that partial payment. So let's apply it to our case of backing out of transaction. Rav holds that if you give a partial payment to a transaction, you can back out of it for the part that you didn't pay for. So because only what you paid for, that is what you can back out for. That's what you cannot back out for, but what you didn't pay for, you could back out for. So therefore, he holds kinegdehu kaina, that aligns itself with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. Rabbi Yochanan holds that a partial payment is considered as if you gave the whole payment, and therefore, if you give a partial payment, you can never back out of a transaction because you verbally committed to that transaction and you gave money. So therefore, Rabbi Yochanan will align itself with the opinion of Shimon ben Gamliel. So basically, what the Gemara just went through, this exercise, is to prove that the machlokes amaroim between Rav and Rabbi Yochanan is the same machlokes between Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel and Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, where Rabbi Yochanan will align himself with the opinion of Shimon ben Gamliel, and Rav would align himself with the opinion of Yehuda Nasi. That's what the Gemara holds right now. Says the Gemara, like not so. You don't have to learn that their machlokes are the same. My Einam Shaman to come Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. What did Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel say that it doesn't cancel out? It's on that part that you don't have a mashkin. In other words, Shimon ben Gamliel could align himself with the opinion of Rav. And when he said it doesn't cancel out, it only doesn't cancel out that you're holding a mashkin on, but the other half does get canceled out. And Michlal, the Rabbi Yehuda Stanasi Saba, Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi holds, even the part that you do carry a mashkin will get canceled out. You will get canceled out, even though you're holding a collateral for half the loan. So then your question was, why would anybody want to take a mashkin? In other words, why would the lender take a mashkin if according to Yehuda Nasi, the entire loan will get canceled out by Shemitah? Answers the Gemara, this will motivate the borrower to remind himself that, hey, you have a loan and you gave a collateral and you probably want the collateral back, so do what you can to start paying back that loan. Truth be told, if he didn't pay back the loan and come Shemitah time, then the whole loan is totally canceled. That's the Gemara a discussion about backing out of your word. I mean, basically, that's what we're discussing. You give your word for something, can you back out of it? Rav Kahana, Yav le Zuze Akitna. Rav Kahana gave Yav le Zuze Akitna. So they gave Rav Kahana money. I guess Rav Kahana was selling linen, and the purchaser gave Rav Kahana money to buy linen. L'soif iyake kitana. But then the price of linen went up. So obviously Rav Kahana wanted to back out of the deal because he could resell it on the open market for more than what he agreed to. Also, the Kami to Rav. So he came to Rav and he asked the question, can I back out of this transaction? Amalei, so Rav told him, but my dinakita zuzi havluhu. Whatever you took money for, if you took a partial payment, that you cannot back out of because you'll get a curse. The idach, but the other part, you didn't take any money. So basically, dvaram ninhu, it was just a verbal commitment. Udvaram ein behem mishum chusrei amar. Then there's no problem of being called somebody not trustworthy. In other words, when do we say that you should not back out of a transaction is if the guy gave you the money. Now, although just the getting the money doesn't mean the transaction is effective, but the fact that you accepted money and verbally committed to the transaction, don't back out because you'll get a curse. But if you verbally committed to transaction, but you didn't accept any money yet, which was the case of the partial payment of Rav Kahana for the linen, then Rav advised him that you could back out of it because circumstances change, and therefore you want to make a bigger profit. So we understand that why you want to back out of it. The Itmar, because this is the machlokes. Dvarim, if you just verbally commit to a transaction, Rav says, if you want to change your mind because of circumstances, there's no problem of being called somebody not trustworthy because that's what people do. I mean, things change. Rabbi Yochan's more strict. If you gave a handshake or whatever it is, and you committed to a transaction, even though no money transferred, still you cannot back out of it. And if you do, the rabbis are not so pleased with you about that. So now the Gemara asks the question against Rabbi Yochanan. So the Gemara says against Rav. The Brisa says like this. Rabbi Yehuda says, "Ma Talmud Loimahin Sedek." The Torah tells you that you have to have proper weights. You can't have numbered weights. If you're selling something, you make sure your scales work properly. The Torah says even if you're selling a big item or small item, certainly you can't rip anybody off by having false weights. So the Gemara says, the Torah tells you can't rip somebody off proportionally, even if the weight is big. Let's say you're selling him 10 pounds, and you can't rip him off by having a weight that lowers it by 1 pound. So certainly, if you're selling him a small amount, let's say you're selling him a 2 pound thing, certainly you can't rip him off by 1 pound. So why did the Torah tell you hin tzedek and eifot tzedek? You have to have your weights corrected. The Torah is telling you another idea. Wherever you say yes, you should be held accountable. And if you say no, you should also be held accountable. Then in other words, the Torah is telling you that verbally your words have to be corrected, have to be accurate. So we see from here that verbal commitments do mean something and you cannot back out of it. So this is against what Rav said. Rav said, even though you gave a verbal commitment, doesn't mean you have to follow through. Abai says no. That pasuk is telling you, you should not be insincere in your commitments. That speak with your mouth and in your heart, you mean something else. In other words, when you originally gave that commitment, you certainly were sincere. The reason why you want to back out of the commitment is because circumstances change. That's not what the Torah is telling you. The Torah is just telling you, do not speak insincerely. That you mean something in your heart and you're saying something else with your mouth. Says the Gemara Meisvi. I'll ask you another question. Rav Shimon says, "Afa pisha amar talis koina dina zov ve'ein dina zov koina talis mikol maka kach halacha." Rav Shimon says this is the halacha. Aval amru. The halacha is misha par b'achidara malba b'achidara flaga hu asel lepipara memi she'eina oimed bidi burai. That if just by a verbal commitment, right, even though no money transferred, as the Gemara elaborated on this brisa, you still will get a mishapara, or Chachamim will not be pleased with you. So this is against Rav. This clearly says that Rav Shimon holds that once you verbally commit to something, you have to follow through, even though no money changed hands. So how could Rav say that, no, you could change your mind? Answers the Gemara, you're right. Tanahi, it is a machlekes tanaim. Reb Shimon will definitely hold that you can't change your mind, but it's not there. There is proof that you could change your mind. Tonight we learned in the Mishnah. Ma'aseh Rabbi Yochanan ben Metzia, Shlomo Levnoi. Rabbi Yochanan said to his son, he brought his son into the business. He said, "Save us charli lona pa'alim. Go hire me workers." Halach, so the son hired the workers, Jewish workers, upasak lahem mezainis, and he committed that he's going to feed them a nice lunch every day. So when he came back to his father, he says, I hired Jewish workers, I did frum, I just came from Koilel, and I learned how to run a business. I hired Jewish workers, and I promised them to give them lunch. His father said, my son, his father told him, what did you mean you're giving them lunch? What does lunch mean? They could say we want caviar for lunch, or we want something very, very expensive for lunch. As long as you didn't say precisely what you're giving for lunch, somebody who's a Jewish person can demand that he comes from a royal lineage, and he understood that you're committed to give him a royal lunch every day. Elo, he told his son, before they start their job, go tell them, I'm only giving you like bread and little hummus, but nothing else. That's what you have to say. But wait a second. The son committed to give this lunch no matter what they're going to ask for lunch. Once you verbally commit to something, you have to follow through. Amalei said, how could his father advise his son, Zil Hadabach, go change your mind, go back and say, you didn't mean it. But wait a second, the son hired these workers and told them that he's going to pay them this great lunch, no matter what they're going to ask for. So we see that Rabbi Yochanan, who's a Tana, holds that even if you verbally commit to something, you could back out of it. So the Gemara says not necessarily true. Shana Hasam, over there it's different. That the workers themselves did not rely on the son on the son's commitment to provide lunch. Why didn't the workers rely that the son committed for lunch? My tama, because maybe the other they knew this is the son of the boss, the alavucha samach, that he still needs to ask his father. So therefore, they didn't. It wasn't the verbal commitment that they understood that was final. So the Gemara says, if they didn't understand that it was final, why did his father say, "Oh, make sure that as long as they didn't start working, you can change your mind." If they started the job that they were doing, so then but they didn't. They understood that the son still needs to ask his father about the lunch perk. So why would the Rabbi Yochanan say that if they started the job, then we can't back out of it anymore? So answers the Gemara is if they started the job, they can assume that the son really asked the father. Amri, they will say to themselves, he told the father about the perquisite. He was agreeable to that. So therefore, if they started the job, you can't back out of it because they already relied on it. So, but the Gemara is going with this is that could be that Rabbi Yochanan holds that Rabbi Yochanan ben Metzia will hold that even if you verbally commit to something, you can't back out. Over there's an exception because the recipients, the workers, did not rely that the commitment was a final commitment. Anyway, we're still back to the machlekes between Rav and Rabbi Yochanan. Says the Gemara, Mi Omar Rabbi Yochanan, did Rabbi Yochanan say such a thing that once you verbally commit, you can't back out? Omar Rabbi Babachon Rabbi Yochanan. The guy says to his friend, I giving you a gift. Yochel Laksaboy. Rabbi Yochanan says you could verbally say it. I'm not giving you the gift. Yochel says the Gemara, Pshita, of course you didn't give the gift. Elamut Laksaboy. What Rabbi Yochanan meant to say, you're permitted, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing like the Chachamim are going to say, oh, you're a bad guy for doing something like that. So Amar Papa qualified. That Rabbi Yochanan will agree that if it's a small gift, you can't back out. Because the guy who's the recipient of the gift, if you committed to something, you're not allowed to back out because the guy is relying on you following through. But if you say you're going to give him a big gift, let's say you say you're going to give him a house as a gift, well, then if circumstances change and you have a change of heart, as long as the guy didn't make a kinyan, you could back out because the recipient was not relying that you're going to follow through until you actually do follow through. So that's qualifies Rabbi Yochanan's opinion of that you could back out of something. Rabbi Yochanan would agree you could back out of something if circumstances change, if it's a large gift, but if it's a small gift, you can't back out of it. And the Gemara says, that holds true because I'll prove it to you. The Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Yisrael Shamal ben Levi, a Jew says to a ben Levi, I have a kur of meiser in my hands, and I'm giving it to you as meiser sheni. Kur is a small amount, relatively speaking. So Ben Levi Rishoy Lasas Trumas Maisal Makam Acha. The Ben Levi can says, since the Yisrael committed that he's giving me his Meiser Rishon, I'm going to make it Trumas Meiser because I owe Trumas Meiser to the Kohen. As you know, Levi has to give part of his income to a Kohen. So he can trust, the Ben Levi can trust that Yisrael is not going to back out. If you're going to say by a small amount, you can't back out. That's why Rabbi Yochanan said that Ben Levi could make it Trumas Meiser because he can knows for a fact that the Jew is not going to back out. If you're going to say that that you're allowed to back out, then why could the Ben Levi, as long as he didn't receive the Meiser Rishon, why could he make it Trumas Meiser when it's not even in his hand? It could be that he's going to eat tevel because when let's say the Yisrael backs out from giving him the Meiser Rishon, turns out he was using it as Trumas Meiser for something else, and he's eating tevel. So it must be that Rabbi Yochanan does maintain his opinion that there are certain circumstances when you could verbally commit to something, you can't back out. And that is when it's a small gift. So that's what the Gemara wants to prove. So the Gemara says, no, here we're talking about really, Rabbi Yochanan possibly could hold that you're always allowed to back out of something. The reason why the Ben Levi can be sure that the Yisrael is not going to back out is because it's talking about the Yisrael actually gave it to the Ben Levi, and now the Ben Levi returned it back to Yisrael and told him, you watch it for me. So the Gemara says, if that's the case, so it really belongs to the Levi. Ema Sefer. What does the Sefer say? Nosnim leben Levi acha ein lo olav trumus. V'isal kadaita grunch not the man of Vikidi Esplay. Amai ein lo olav trumus. If Yisrael does back out, the Brisa says, "Oh, the Ben Levi could, you're saying not nice things about the Yisrael, but that's it." But if we're talking about a case where the Levi took ownership of that Meiser Rishon, then what do you mean he's only complaining to the Yisrael? Even the Mashche, since he took it, that's his money. In other words, that the Yisrael can never give it away to somebody else. So why does the Brises end off saying, "Oh, the Yisrael, if he does change his mind, okay, tough luck noogies on the Levi"? What do you mean? If you told me that if the Ben Levi took possession, it must belong to the Ben Levi. And Lav Shmamini, it must be like this. But the Loy Notli, you have to say like we originally said, that he never took possession. And Shmamina, that Rabbi Yochanan is saying that even though you didn't take possession, the Yisrael should not back out, is not allowed to back out, because he gets a curse, or Chachamim don't like that, such a person. And that was only said because it's a small amount of money. So again, we have this machlokes. Can somebody verbally back out of something if he verbally committed to something? If you verbally committed to something with no money transferring, Rav says, and we're dealing with a small amount of money. Rav says you can verbally, you can back out, and Rabbi Yochanan says you cannot. Ruth Gemara, how there was this person, there was a person that gave money for sesame seeds. In the end, the sesame seeds went up in value. So the seller of the sesame seeds, Hadribay, wanted to back out of the transaction. And he said to him, I don't want to sell my sesame seeds to you. Shekal Zuzach, take your money. So he verbally took money, and then he wants to back out of the transaction. So the guy that gave the money didn't come back to take the money back from the seller. Igniv, then it got stolen from the seller. Also, the Kami de Rava, so they came from the Rava. Does the seller now owe the money, the potential, the back out seller, does he owe the money to the purchaser, the potential purchaser? Amalei, so Rava said, Kiva the Amalach calls of Laishakla, since he told you, come take your money, I don't want it anymore, and I'm not selling it to you. Not only is he not a Shemisacha, that's Chayven Geneva, but even a Shemichinim he's not, because he told you to come pick up the money, and you didn't come, so it's really a negligence on the purchaser. When he understood, and he got wind that the transaction is not following through, he should have come pick up his money. So we understand this to be a transaction. Amalei Rabban Ravava, but the guy that backed out of the transaction, the sesame seed owner, he's going to get a curse for that. And why would he want to do that? So Rava said, Hachinami, he's going to get a curse. If he doesn't want to return the money or he doesn't want to make the purchaser whole, he's going to get that mishapara for backing out of selling of the sesame seeds. But besides from that, he doesn't on the technical din, he doesn't take responsibility of the stolen money because he told the guy, "Come pick up your money. I don't want to follow through on this transaction," and that's what Rava was dealing with, not with the curses. Amar Apape Amali Ravina. Rapapi said, Ravina told me that the story happened totally different. Rabbi told me the real story that happened. Va'amile Rav Shmuel Bar Zutra shmei. And others say the story was with Rav Shmuel Bar Zutra. Totally, you got the whole story wrong. The person that had the sesame seed said would never have backed out of these words if this wasn't indeed a transaction. And the guy who told Rapapi told him that I was the subject of the story. And maybe he was Rav Tuvis or Shmuel, and he told Rav Rina what the story was. It was Friday afternoon. I was sitting in maybe Mava Sedra. And a guy knocked on my door. And he asked me, do I have sesame seeds to be sold? Amalei, so I told him, we go to Amar base. Loy, I don't have sesame seeds to be sold. Amalehu, oh, then let you keep my money by you, because I can't take it home. It's Friday afternoon. It's almost Shkia time. Amalei, so I told him, how basic come up, put it anywhere in my house. And come pick up your money, Matzah Shabbos. He put it in the house, and it got stolen on Friday night. Also, he came to Rava. Amalei called hal basic kamach the guy, Rav Tuvis did not want to be called Meshomer. He said, you could keep it here, but I'm not taking responsibility. And if it got stolen on Friday night, so what? That's not his, that we can't fault him for that. If it wasn't a transaction, but wasn't there an appendix to that story that you're going to get a curse for that, a mishapara curse? V'amali, he said, that never happened. In other words, you got the story wrong. It was just a question of somebody coming to somebody Erev Shabbos and asking him to watch my sesame seeds, and the guys didn't want to take responsibility. But that was the beginning, middle, end of the story. Okay, one more minute and then we'll stop. Once we gave money, the Chachamim says, if you gave money, and as long as you didn't do Mashiach, the Chachamim say that the seller or the purchaser can back out. Rab Shimon says, no, only the seller can back out. The purchaser can't get back out because he gave his money. Once you give your money, no backsies. Tanya, we learned in the Baraisa, Rab Shimon said, Emasai bisman shekesav peres biyad hamoicha. Aval kesav biyad moicha, peres biyad lakeach, eni yochel achsaboy, b'bnei shekasba biyadei. Rab Shimon said that if money did was transferred by the purchaser to the seller, and the seller gave the fruits, then nobody can back out. So wait a second, biyad meichahu, and the Gemara says because his money was never given over to the seller. Wait a second, biyad meichahu, he did give over the money to the seller. And we're talking about, Rab Shimon said, if the money was given over to the seller and the seller gave the produce to the purchaser, no one can back out. Ella, the nation to make kasper biyad. Of course, nobody can back out because it means that the value of what the money was given for is now in the purchaser's hands, so nobody can back out. So again, if the transaction was completed, nobody can back out. So as the Gemara says, Pshita, of course nobody can back out. If the money was by the seller and the produce was by the purchaser, of course nobody can back out. Rava said, really, the produce was located in the attic of the purchaser. In other words, the purchaser didn't do Mashiach. He rented his attic to the seller, and the seller stored produce in the attic of the purchaser, and the purchaser bought some of the produce that was in his attic, which was rented to the seller. So therefore, even though you didn't do Mashiach, once you gave the money, that's it, because already you took possession of it. The whole reason why Chachamim said that money is not to make a purchase and required a Mashiach is because we want the Moichar to protect the assets should a fire break out. But hacha b'reshus lekechi, it's really in the possession of the purchaser because he lives downstairs. Although, albeit he rented the upstairs to the seller, but if a fire breaks out, even after the lake of if a fire breaks out, he's going to try to save his items that are stored in the attic. So therefore, just by giving over the money, then Rabbi Shimon said the seller cannot back out anymore. Says the Gemara, one final point. Ahu Gavra, there was this person, Yav Ziza Chamara. The Soif Shama de Kalboil and Minsmain the Pain Panzik Rafila. A guy gave money to buy wine. Then he heard that the government is confiscating every person who bought wine. So Amalei, so he told the seller, Havli Zuza, give me my money back. Loibina Chamara, I don't want your wine. So the purchaser is backing out of a transaction that he gave money to. That is the opinion of the Rabbanan that you could do that. Also, the comment of Chizda, just like the final transaction is Mashiach for the seller, the purchaser also, what makes a transaction final is if he did Mashiach. If he did not do Mashiach, then we allow the purchaser to back out of the transaction. Okay, Be'ez Hashem, continue tomorrow.